And then if people come in, just let them in. Okay, so first and for all, we do record the sessions. So if you missed one, that's totally okay. You can just email me, and then I'm happy to share the slides, and I'll send you the recording because the sequence is important. And although we'll do a tiny repetition now about what we did last time, but the sequence is important sort of to understand the historical context of the events. So we have both the slides and the recording. Feel free to reach out later and I will share with you. I personally am not at ORME and not in Los Angeles, actually. For those who don't know, I am in Portugal. I'm a fellow at this international interface conference that I've been part of for the last year. And this is our last session. And I was actually debating with myself a lot about coming, especially with everything that's going on. I'm the only Israeli out of 70 plus participants from all over the world. And I would say probably that 3/4 of the participants are Muslim from the Arab countries. So actually, at the very beginning,
the temple.
what?
Well, she's not in her.
It's a nicer background than my hotel room at 3:30 in the morning. So I figured it will make us feel comfortable if we have the ark at our sanctuary behind as a background. But anyway, I'm sharing because it's important, not because I'm just happy to share. I'm always happy to share, but just to say that I was really debating among myself if my heart can take being in this environment. And I did decided to come. And already today, after the first day, when we didn't even start officially, I know it was the right decision, although at times it is very, very uncomfortable. And the simple reason for that is because I truly believe that knowledge is power, which is the main reason why immediately when this current war started, I initiated this particular course, because when we know, then we can address it. We can talk about it with ourselves, but more importantly, at this time, with other people. So tonight at dinner, I found myself sitting in a round table when all the neighbors on both sides of me, left and right, were from Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt. And maybe being an American Jew, it's a normal situation because you go to many different places and you sort of in interaction with people from all over the world. But for an Israeli, it is not a normal situation. I can guarantee to you. And although each of us knew that we're going to find one another this week, still realizing and sitting at the same table, people from Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt, that piece is normal for them. But then to have an Israeli person, and then on top of that, a woman, and on top of that, a rabbi around your dinner table is very, very, very odd. The Egyptian fellow is a Christian pastor. He is a minority in his own country, and he was very, very intrigued. So everybody else left, and we stayed for a long time, and he just kept asking me questions. And I'm not going to repeat the questions, but at the end, he had this really confused expression on his face. And he told me, so wait a minute, you consider yourself progressive? And I said, yes. And then he says, and you want to say that you're a Zionist? I say, yes. And he says, and it goes together? I said, yes. And he's like, I have never known that. And I was thinking to myself, good. That's the best reason to be here, with all the pain that I'm still sure that will come. But it's really just to emphasize that knowledge is power. So this is my way to say thank you to all of you for embarking on this journey. And next week, God willing, those of you who are able to come and meet me in person at the temple, we're going to be doing this like the first session, both in person and on Zoom. But today, all of us are on Zoom. So if you're able to open your camera, please do so we can feel closer to one another. Although I'm using a PowerPoint and all of that, but it's just nice to see each other. And we're gonna start. Oh, Lisa, please enable me to share. Any thoughts or questions or anything on your mind before we dive in? Okay. All right. So here we are, third session. I will say just on the logistical note that we will meet next week, which is December 6th, in person and on Zoom. And we will add another session because we lost one in the middle because of Thanksgiving. So it will be in sequence. So December 6th and December 13th, if you'll come meet me in person, we'll light Hanukkah candles together. And that will be our last session about this, which will be really more of a discussion, sort of to talk about current events and going forward, what are the possibilities. So if you'll be able to make it in person, it will be nice. And of course, totally fine to also be on Zoom. So that's really on the logistical level. It is customary in Judaism when we teach and something is happening in the world or we're thinking about particular someone, to dedicate our learning time to either that cause or that person or a group of people. So with your permission, I would like to dedicate our learning time today to the Bibas family. The mom is Shiri Bibas and her husband is Yarden Bibas, and the two little babies, the older one is Ariel, who's 4 years old, and the baby is Kfir, who was 9 months on October 7th, and it's getting close to being 11 months today. The Bibas family was taken from their home on October 7th. The picture here at the bottom really became in so many ways the symbol of this war, of a very courageous young woman who was taking her two children, wrapping them on her chest as all of them are being kidnapped by Hamas terrorists into Gaza. And we had all reasons to believe that they are kept alive in a tunnel underground, like the rest of the 240 plus hostages. Over the last 6 days, most of the children and the teenagers were released by the Hamas, and the Bibas family did not get to any of the lists. And then yesterday, in a very cruel fashion, a notice came out from the Hamas saying that Mother Shiri and the children Ariel and Kfir Bibas are no longer alive, without showing any testimony to that fact. When a day earlier, they said that they are held by a different terroristic organization in a city called Khan Yunis, which is toward the southern part of Gaza Strip. And later, yesterday, they also said that they were killed by the Israeli Air Forces. So all of that is just traumatic beyond any doubt. So I would like to dedicate our learning time to the Bibas family that I've been thinking about throughout the entire day today, and just hoping from the bottom of my heart that what they're saying is not true, and that somehow they're still with us in this world, and that with the help of God and miracle and a lot of prayers and hopes, we'll be able to release them and bring them back to Israel in the near future. So for the rescue and safe rescue of the Bibas family. I would like us to review just a little bit what we did on our previous session. And instead of going through the slideshow that I'm happy to share afterwards, if you missed the class, I would like us to watch a brief video. Just share sound. I hope this will work. Okay, let's see. This. And can you see in here?
Here's a question for you. How would you feel if the future of the place you call home was in the hands of others? With the end of World War I, the League of Nations took charge of areas in the Middle East called mandates. One of these was the British Mandate for Palestine. Britain was assigned to administer it until it was ready for self-governance. The mandate expressed support for the idea of a Jewish national home, as promised in the Balfour Declaration. Acknowledging Arab aspirations for independence, the British set aside the region east of the Jordan River as the Emirate of Transjordan. Jews were prohibited from settling there. In the remaining part of the Palestine Mandate, Zionist Jews worked to reestablish a Jewish home in their ancient homeland. They joined existing communities, bought land, and developed it into collective farms and towns. This growth attracted Arabs from neighboring areas. Some arrived encouraged by economic opportunity, but others worried as they watched Jews build institutions and prepare for independence. These fears led to Arab riots in Jerusalem in the 1920s, which lashed out at the Jews and the British. British attempts to stop the violence failed. The Jews organized and defended themselves, but the unrest continued. In response to an Arab revolt in 1936, the British issued the Peel Commission Report. It proposed the creation of two states, one Jewish and one Arab, with a neutral area under British control. The Jews were unhappy with the small area of land they were offered, and the Arabs rejected the proposal altogether. A year later, the British abandoned this plan for partition, saying it was impractical. As Jewish and Arab populations grew, tensions grew too, increasing pressure on all parties. Arab riots continued. In another effort to stop the violence, the British issued a white paper in 1939. It greatly restricted Jewish immigration to the Mandate. This closed off an important refuge at a time when the Nazis were stepping up persecution of Jews who were desperate to escape Germany. With the outbreak of World War II, most countries closed their doors to Jewish refugees. At the end of the war, the region was still in turmoil. With ongoing Arab protests and Jewish resistance to British rule, Great Britain had had enough. It turned the fate of the Palestine Mandate over to the international community and the newly formed United Nations. On November 29, 1947, the UN voted on Resolution 181. The mandate would be divided into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem as an international city.
Yes, Egypt. Now.
Okay, I'm going to pause it here. This is really just to remind us we arrived. And now I hope that you will get my excitement also, because when I planned this course and I knew that one of the classes, it didn't click in my mind that we as you and I, going to celebrate one of the most important events that ever happened in the history of our people, which took place exactly 76 years ago today, on November 29th, 1947. And that event is that the countries of the world, for the first time in our modern history, have decided that the Jewish people should have independence on our historic homeland. And the reason that it didn't click with me when I was planning and I knew that November 29th is one of the dates is because the way we learn it, definitely in Israel, about this very, very important day, which is marked in all colors of the calendar. We don't address it as November 29th. We address it here Hebrew, Kafet of November. Kafet is 29.
I don't know
In
what.
Lana, you're breaking up.
Yeah, Rabbi Lana, we have a poor connection.
Okay, 1 second.
Didn't hear a lot of what
Right.
you said.
Oh. And okay, now
It's
okay
kind
now?
of similar to the way it was, but we'll see. We can try. Do you want me to
Okay.
share the PowerPoint if you want, and then you can just try talking, because that may help.
Yes, okay, let's try. Hold on. That means I need
If
to
you
send it
like,
to you.
just send it to me through the chat or share it with me. I can.
Okay, I can do that. 1 second. Really? Because it says my internet is 100%. You still don't
Yeah, your voice keeps cutting out. That's the real problem. We'll see if this helps. I don't know.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's fine. We'll figure it out.
Okay, let me share this with you. Was the video though? Was it that fine?
Yeah, the video was okay. It's just when you speak, sometimes it goes in and out.
Okay, well, let's try that. And please tell me if it's not getting better, then I'll switch.
Yeah, hopefully that'll work.
Okay, there you go.
I get it. Let's see.
Okay, so let's see.
Okay, there it is.
Okay, so sorry everyone. I don't know.
This should make it.
I'm looking at the connection and it seems totally fine. Is it better now that I'm talking?
I think it is. Yeah, let's see. Let's see if it
Okay. All right. So I'll say again that today we're celebrating a very, very important event in Jewish history, the 29th of November, which is the day of the partition plan vote in the United Nations. And when we learn about it in Israel, we don't refer it as November 29th. We say it with the Hebrew letters of the date. So we learn it as Kaftet of November, which means the same, but it has the Hebrew touch in it. And it's marked in the calendar with all the possible colors as one of the most important days in Jewish history. And it happened today on November 29th, exactly 76 years ago. So how cool is that? I hope you're excited as I am. And I only noticed it literally this week when I thought about it. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna talk about Kaftet of November and it's gonna be to the day, not the day before, not the day after. Well, technically for me, it's already the 30th, but for you, it's the 29th. So it's very, very, very exciting. So we talked about everything, not everything, but the major events that really led us to this day, to be on November 29th, 1947. And we did mention that during the 30 years of the British mandate over Palestine, it is not the first suggestion to part the land between the two parties or the two nations, the two people, the Jewish people and Palestinian Arabs. But when we understand that there were other partition plans that came earlier and offered the Jewish people way less and the Palestinian Arabs way more, and the Palestinian Arabs always said no, and the Jewish people always said yes, then it hopefully will make it easier for us to understand both the division, but more importantly, the response of the two sides to this key situation, which is the United Nations partition plan over Palestine, that again took place exactly to the day, today, 76 years ago, November 29th. The way it worked is that the British mandate in 1946, 6 months prior to this very important event, decided they no longer want to stay in Palestine, trying to figure it out, trying to side one party and then the other. They coming to a realization that they are not going to solve this problem. And therefore, they're coming to the United Nations that literally was just established and basically handing over the keys to the mandate they had over this piece of land. And the United Nations asked them to give them time to figure it out. They formed a committee of 11 representatives from different countries in the world. They're coming to Palestine for 5 weeks to explore, to learn. And after 5 weeks, they are basically going to New York. And this is the plan. This is the suggestion that they are recommending to the nations of the world to vote on, which got to be called the famous partition plan for Palestine. Lisa, let's go forward. Let's get to so this is the United Nations Nation building at the day of the vote. And let's look at the map. No, one earlier, the map, the one before. Yes, thank you. Is it better now, the connection? It's good?
A lot better, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So the way it worked, they looked at where the various populations were distributed geographically. And based on that, they were making the decisions. Meaning, if an area was predominantly Jewish, that went to the Jewish side. If an area was predominantly inhabited by Palestinian Arabs, that went to the Palestinian side. Jerusalem and Bethlehem were supposed to be under international control because of the religious sensitivities. So on both of these maps, the one on the right is a little bit more illustrative and less details, but the colors, this is what we're looking at. And the one on the left is the historic map that was used when the countries of the world were actually voting, and we'll see the split in just a minute. So everything that is colored orange, that was the suggestion for the Arab Palestinian country that was supposed to be called Palestine. And can you see the arrow when I'm pointing? So the Gaza Strip, which is right over here. Lisa, I think that you're moving yours also. So let me just show. Thank you. Okay, so I'm over here. I'm showing now on the map on the right side. Everything that is orange, and I'm pointing now on the Gaza Strip, which is at the southern part of the Mediterranean, and it goes a little bit to the south of the Negev Desert. That was supposed to be Palestine. Then we have the big area right in the middle, right in the center, sort of surrounding Jerusalem. This we called nowadays the West Bank, or in Jewish language, Judea and Samaria. That was predominantly Palestinian Arab, so that was supposed to be part of Palestine as well. And then an area here on the northern shore of the Mediterranean Sea and Galilee, that was also predominantly inhabited by the Palestinian Arabs, and therefore was supposed to be part of Palestine. And then everything in the light blue, which is the big triangle at the bottom part of the map, which is the Negev Desert, and then the major strip of land along the seaside, along the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, and this area in the northern part of the Galilee. this was supposed to be part of the Jewish state. I'm not going to go into the actual details of the percentage, but more or less it was 55% of the land was supposed to be part of Palestine, and 45% of the land was supposed to be Israel. When again, notice that Jerusalem, which is very, very, very important, was not supposed to be part of any of the countries. It was supposed to be part of the international control. And here we are at the United Nations, November 29th. Lisa, let's go forward. The countries of the world are voting. 33 countries are voting in favor of this partition plan. You can see the list if you want to know who they are. 13 countries are voting against this plan. A lot of them are Muslim countries. Again, you can see the list. And 10 countries abstain, including, see on the list, second to the bottom, United Kingdom, which essentially started the whole thing. They abstained. But 33 countries, which was the majority, said, yes, it's a good plan. Let's split, let's divide, and let's make sure that there are two countries for the two people that are sharing this land. And none of them is going anywhere. Now, it is for us to understand what were the responses of the two sides. Lisa, let's go forward. Actually, let's listen to it just because it's on the day and it's so historic. And some of you maybe have a childhood remembrance of how it sounded, or maybe your parents or your grandparents told you, because truly for our people, it was the joyous day in 2000 years of history of us being dispersed around the world. For the first time, the world, the nations of the world decided that it's a good idea for the Jewish people to have their own country. So this is literally just a few seconds to hear the sounds of that epic, important day of November 29th, 1947. Lisa, please share with us. Just make sure that your sound is good.
No.
Can you hear?
Ukraine? Yes. Soviet Union? Yes. United Kingdom? Abstain. United States? Yes. Yugoslavia? Abstain.
The resolution of the Dutch Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstained.
Okay, let's go forward. I really, really hope that you are moved as I am. Let's keep that. Let's keep going forward. So you saw how the Jewish side, they were all tuned to the radio, one more, and they really listened to every single word, one more. And the next thing that is happening, that people are just going to the streets, dancing, celebrating, because it really, really, really was such a joyous event. So the Jewish people said 100 times yes to this plan, even though it did not have Jerusalem, even though it did not have Judea and Samaria / the West Bank, which hold some of the most important historic landmarks in our history. You see, if we want to walk the path of the Bible, if we want to follow the footsteps of Abraham, of King David, of other biblical figures, this is where it all happened, in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank. But that was not supposed to be part of Israel. Nevertheless, it was very, very far from being perfect. It was very, very far from being complete. But we had a leader, David Ben-Gurion, that said, it is not perfect and it is not complete, but, very big but, it's better than nothing. So he and people around him said 100 times, yes, we're going to take this plan. We're going to make it work. And with what we are receiving, we're going to build a sovereign, independent Jewish homeland that will allow to open its gates to all the Jewish people around the world to come home, to feel home, to feel protected only 3 years after the Holocaust. So that was the Jewish reaction. Let's go forward and understand that unfortunately, the counter reaction was not a celebration and was not joyous. And actually, the following day, not the following week and not the following months, the following day, on November 30th, 1947, the Palestinian Arabs of the land of Israel say, no way. We are not sharing. We either going to have it all or we're not going to have anything, which is the exact same thing that they were saying all along throughout the first half of the 20th century, when they were offered way more than 55% of the land. Then at this point, when it was 55% of the land, they said, it's not going to happen. And they immediately the following day start a war. Now, a war is a very big word to use, because usually when we talk about wars, we talk about countries and we talk about established armies, none of which was true for any of the parties. There were no countries yet. There were definitely no armies. There was barely leadership, barely any weapon. But when you look at what was happening on the ground, you cannot use any other word than a war, kind of similar to, unfortunately, nowadays. So what we really talk about is 600,000 Jewish people on one side, and double the number, 1,200,000 Palestinian Arabs on the other side, fighting one another in a guerrilla type war, using all the weapons they could get their hands on, doing a lot of underground activities and military techniques for the next 6 months until May 15th, 1948. Why only 6 months? Because according to that same United Nations resolution of the partition plan, since the majority of the country said, yes, let's go with this plan, they needed to put a date to when the British mandate will be officially over, so these two countries will be able to be established. And the official date was May 15th, 1948. And therefore, this war that we're about to describe in a few more sentences had 3 stages to it. The first stage was from November 30th, 1947, the day after the vote, all the way until mid-May 1948. The second stage of the war took place on May 14th, 1948. It's a single-day event, but it's an event that changed definitely our history, but the history of the whole world, and that is the establishment of the State of Israel. And then the third stage of the war starts 5 minutes after midnight on May 15th, 1948, when the last Brits left Palestine, and 5 minutes after, 7 Arab armies were already bombarding the 5-minute-old young country called Israel. And that stage of the war lasted for almost another year. We'll get there in just a minute. Just before, let's turn to the next slide. 2 weeks into this war, December 15th, 1947, the person who would later become the first president of Israel, you know that the main role in the Israeli leadership is prime minister. The Israeli prime minister is the equivalent of the American president, but Israel does have a president, and the role of the president is like the Queen. Well, now it's the King of England. It's more of a representative figure, but still one that is very respected. And Dr. Chaim Weizmann, who was not only the first president of the State of Israel, he was actually a Nobel Prize laureate in chemistry. And he was a British lord who was very, very close with the leadership of the British Mandate and was fundamental for the Balfour Declaration in 1917 and so on. 2 weeks into this war, he writes an article in a daily newspaper. And in that article, he says the following sentence, and I quote, he says like this: a Jewish state will not be given to the Jewish people on a silver platter. This is a very, very important sentence. So I'm going to say it again. A Jewish state will not be given to the Jewish people on a silver platter. 4 days after he said the sentence, a person who at the time and until today was and is one of the most famous Israeli national poets, Natan Alterman. He wrote a response to Dr. Chaim Weizmann at the same newspaper 4 days later. And because he was a poet, his response is a poem. And the title of the poem is The Silver Platter. And I placed it over here, and I invite us to read this together. And the land will grow still, crimson skies dimming, misting, slowly paling again over smoking frontiers. As the nation stands up, torn at heart, but existing, to receive its first miracle in 2,000 years. As the moment draws near, it will rise, darkness facing, stand straight in the moonlight, in terror and joy. When across from it, step out towards it slowly pacing, in plain sight of all, a young girl and a boy. Dressed in battle gear, dirty shoes heavy with grime. On the path they will climb up while their lips remain sealed. To change garb to white brow, they have not yet found time. Still bone weary from days and from nights in the field. Full of endless fatigue and all drained of motion. Yet the Jews, that's like statues they stand, stiff and still with no motion and no sign that will show if they lie. Nation in tears and amazed at this matter will ask them, who are you? And the two will then say with a soft voice, we are the silver platter on which the Jewish state was given to you today. Then they fall back in darkness as the day's nation looks, and the rest can be found in the history books. It's said that you really need to read a poem twice, at least, but because it's too long and our time is shortened, We're not going to read it again, although I do invite you to do it later. It's a very, very famous poem. You can easily Google it. But I do want to claim that Dr. Chaim Weizmann was wrong when he said a Jewish state will not be given to the Jewish people on a silver platter. Because unfortunately, 8 weeks almost of this current war, every single life that was lost in this conflict is the Jewish state was, and unfortunately is, given to every single Jewish person alive today all over the world. And it's so important that we're learning about how it came to be. And unfortunately, 76 years later, we are still paying that price. Let's move on. By the way, I don't think I said at the beginning of this session, but of course, as always, feel free if you have questions that come up, please write it on the chat and Lisa will monitor. And if we need to answer as we go, we will. If not, we'll do it later, but don't wait. If something comes up, questions, comments, just put it on the chat and Lisa will find a way to weave it into the conversation. Up until now, the War of Independence have definitely been the longest war in the modern history of Israel. And again, as we said, it had 3 stages. So here you can look at the dates, and usually when it's graphic and we can see it, then it's more comprehensive. So the first stage is 6 months guerrilla fighting between the Jews and the Arabs on the ground. And then May 14th, notice that at the top and at the bottom it says May 15th, but the Declaration of Israel's independence was on May 14th. And the only reason for that disobey on David Ben-Gurion's side was the reason that May 15th was Shabbat. It was Saturday. And although David Ben-Gurion was, of course, very Jewish, but very, very secular, but he understood that it is not a good thing to create a Jewish state on a Saturday, after all. So he literally did it just a few hours before. If the end of the day was midnight, he summoned all the important guests, 315 number, to the house of the first mayor of Tel Aviv, which at the time was the first art museum of the city of Tel Aviv. The reason it was all done in Tel Aviv, because we were in the middle of the war. I want us to understand that the state of Israel was born 6 months into the war, right in the middle of the war. At the time when Jerusalem was under siege, it was not possible to reach Jerusalem. There were 100,000 Jewish people in Jerusalem that were completely disconnected from other areas of the country. And therefore, this important event of creation, of becoming, happened in the city of Tel Aviv. So at 4 in the afternoon, 4 p.m., 350 distinguished guests were invited to witness this miracle of the creation of a Jewish state. On a Friday, May 14th, 1948, or in the Hebrew dates, Hay, which means the 5th day of the month of Iyar, 1948. The Declaration of Independence lasted exactly 33 minutes. It was the shortest event in Jewish history, maybe in world history. And after 33 minutes, David Ben-Gurion knocked with his hammer on the table and said, the Jewish state was founded. This meeting is over. Everybody rushed outside to celebrate. Then the sun went down and they celebrated both the Jewish state, newborn state and the beginning of the Sabbath. At midnight, the last British officer waved on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea and went back home to Europe. And literally 5 minutes after, 7 Arab armies, being Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, entered the war to fight the newborn state of Israel and to make sure that it will cease to exist. Notice a very, very important piece of information. It is customary to tell the story to say that the Arab countries entered this war to fight along the side of 1,200,000 Palestinian Arabs. I'm sure you heard that before, and it's not the first time that you hear it from me. This is the customary way of telling the story in the world, in history books, that the Arab countries entered the war to side with the Palestinian Arabs. I want to say that it is a very, very, very far mystical, mythological story, and it's definitely not the truth. And we have a lot of proofs to that. The Arab countries have no interest to help the Palestinian Arabs. The Arab countries wanted to make sure that there is no entity in the world called Israel. And they mainly wanted to take this piece of land called Palestine and to divide it among themselves. This was the goal. In fact, they told the Palestinian Arabs to go away, to escape, reassuring them that they will win the war and then they will be able to come back and live as inhabitants, citizens, residents, something of whichever country will be winning that war. None of which, of course, happened. But this is just a very, very important information to hold, to know as we go further. Lisa, let's continue to the next stage. Just a nice picture to remind us of the beautiful ceremony that we're not going to go into details of its being, but State of Israel was born. It was the main headline all over the world, but immediately after the headline changed to a new stage of the war. And let's look at the map of the Arab countries really entering. So we have Lebanon and Syria coming from the north. We have Jordan and Iraq coming from the east. We have, of course, Egypt and Yemen coming from the south. And we're entering a new stage when a newborn country with a newborn army fighting now not only the inside powers of the Palestinian Arabs, but 7 established armies with everything that it entails into almost a year-long war until different ceasefire agreements were signed with every single one of these countries, or particularly with those who are literally sitting on our borders. So let's take a look at that going forward. It all happened over the course of a few months. One backwards, Lisa. Yes, thank you. So at the end of this war, and it's not one ending, it had several endings because we fought with several armies. So the main ones are those we share a border with, which is, oh, I see that I have Egypt here twice. I'm not sure why, but it was Egypt first, Lebanon, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. What am I missing? Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Jordan. So Egypt first, Lebanon, then Jordan, and then Syria. Oh, Lisa, thank you. Very efficient on the spot. See, I would have never thought of doing that on the spot. This is why we have Lisa. So with each months, notice that with none of these countries, we signed a peace agreement. With every single one of these countries, we signed a ceasefire agreement. With some of these countries, a ceasefire agreement will change into a peace treaty, but much, 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 much later. With Egypt in 1978, with Jordan in 1995, and with Syria and Lebanon, unfortunately, it did not happen until this very day. But nevertheless, the ceasefire is going to end the war. And now we need to deal with the outcomes of the end of this war. And actually, I believe that understanding the outcomes of the end of the war may be the most important piece of this entire course that we are doing together. But before we get to the outcome, let's look at the next slide. Personal names. Words matter. Generally in life, they definitely matter when we talk about the Middle East. And if you remember, the title I gave this course is The Void or the Gap between the Zionist dream and the Palestinian dream. And we said already at the beginning that these are two parallel lines that are not destined to meet. So each of the narratives tells almost the same story, but very, very, very differently. And wars have a very, very big importance that serves the narrative. In the Jewish narrative, we actually have numerous names to address this war. The most common in English is probably the War of Independence, because that's what it was. It was a war for our independence on this land. We also call it the War of 1948, and there are other words in Hebrew. Palestinian narratives uses one word, and nobody questions that. And that word is Nagba in Arabic. And what it means is destruction or complete catastrophe. That is the meaning of the word. And in a minute, you'll understand why they chose to use such a big destructive word. But first, let's talk about the numbers for a minute. 600,000 Palestinian Jews. Please notice the way I chose, and it was my decision to choose my choice of words here because it will change momentarily. But at the beginning of the war, there were 600,000 Palestinian Jews in the land of Israel. 2/3 of the people participated actively in this war. It means that young teenage kids, a lot of them were lying about their age to make sure that they're participating. So we had soldiers who were 16 years old, 14 years old. There were Holocaust survivors that came, and the first thing that happened to them as they came out of the boat was getting a rifle and going to fight. And a lot of them were also killed in the midst of it. Altogether, the Jewish population lost 1% of its total. Just think about what it would mean today. Out of a total population of about 7.5 million Jews in Israel today, what would be 1%? Or if it's easier, think about it in American terms. But I do want to make a statement here that I don't know, and I don't think anybody here or anywhere else knows of a country in our world that started its existence by losing 1% of its population. It's a very, very unique situation. 1% of the Jewish population was killed. Half of them were civilians, half of them were soldiers on active duty, if you like. On the Palestinian side, as we said, there were 1,200,000 in terms of the people on the land. It is very hard to find a concrete number. We can open many different books and we'll find many numbers that are different. They go around between 7,000 to 13,000. And that number includes also the casualties of the Arab armies that joined the larger portion of the war. So this is sort of just to keep in mind and to have an idea. And now as we move forward, we want to understand what happened to every single of these groups of people at the day the war ended, and of course going forward. And that, I truly believe, is the most important understanding and learning of this course. Lisa, please take us forward. First of all, at the end of the war, we have a new map. Remember the partition plan map that we started with? Now we have a new map because the borders shifted. There was a war, and every single war, whether you like it or not, changes borders. So let's learn the new map, which will be crucial to our understanding going forward. The first and most important thing to realize that the idea of the partition plan was to have two countries. But the Jewish people said yes, and the Palestinian Arabs said no. And here we are, at the end of the war that the Palestinian Arabs started, when they said, we are not sharing. In their mind, of course, hoping that the end will be different, but it wasn't. The state of Israel was born in the midst of that war. The state of Palestine was not. And that's important to understand, because that was the initial plan of the United Nations, a plan that the Jewish people also agreed upon. Two countries or two people sharing the land. So now we have a Jewish state, and we do not have a Palestinian state. And we have a very big but. The but is that it is true that we don't have a Palestinian state, but the land, or I should say, most of the land that was originally supposed to be part of the Palestinian state is not part of a state called Israel. It was conquered by two countries, Jordan and Egypt. So the Palestinians did not get to form their own country, but we do have now two new political powers, basically, inside of the newborn state of Israel, conquering and holding on to two geographical areas. If you look here on the east of the Jordan River, we have this area called the West Bank. By the way, why does it call the West Bank? I don't know if you ever thought of it. It is the west bank of the Jordan River. Thank you, Lisa. Oh, this is amazing. I would never know how to do that. Never in a million years. Lisa is illustrating my words. This is wonderful. So the western bank of the Jordan River is the West Bank. By the way, if you really think about it, it doesn't make any sense because the western bank really should go from the river all the way to the sea, which is a very popular slogan of our time, from the river to the sea. But the actual area that is determined as the West Bank is not all the way to the sea, but you can see the actual boundaries of it. And again, I'll just mention that in Jewish language, when we say Judea and Samaria, which really hold some of the most important historical sites in Jewish history, when back all the way to biblical times, it's exactly the same place as the West Bank. But now this area is controlled by Jordan. We also have Jerusalem in the middle, and that is the little triangle here on this map, where you can see it on the map on the left also. Maybe, Lisa, you want to circle it. Jerusalem at the end of the war is split out into two. Now, you remember how Jerusalem was not supposed to be part of any of the countries? Well, there was a war. As a consequence of the war, Jerusalem was conquered by two powers, and now it's split in the middle. Where western part of Jerusalem, which is the new part of Jerusalem, that is held by the state of Israel. And not only that, immediately the state of Israel declares West Jerusalem as its capital. But East Jerusalem, including the old city, for all of you who traveled, that is now held by Jordan, together with the entire West Bank. And that is very important. And then the second power is Egypt. And Egypt conquered the area that is called the Gaza Strip. By the way, if we go back to the map of the partition plan, the Gaza Strip was this, but it also had a piece over here of the Negev desert. What Egypt was able to conquer is only this area that is attached to the seashore. That is now part of Egypt. Everything else, which is green, meaning the entire Negev desert, the entire seashore side, from the city of Ashkelon, which is the southern point on the Israeli shore, all the way to the Lebanese border here, is in Israeli hands. The entire Galilee is in Israeli hands. And this narrow strip of land alongside the Zahula Valley is also in Israeli hands. Notice that Israel has territorial continuity, very important for a country's sobriety and existence. And there is no territorial continuity between the Gaza Strip, which is now held by Egypt, and the West Bank, which is now held by Jordan. This is very important information. So this is a very, very important map to realize the results of that war. And now that we have that in mind, the most important thing that we need to understand is not only the map, but what is happening with the people. Lisa, let's go further and then maybe we'll go back again. So what is happening is the following. Remember how a couple minutes ago I addressed the Jewish population as Palestinian Jews? Because before May 14th, 1948, the Jewish people lived in a country, in a land called Palestine, and therefore they were Palestinian Jews. That's how they refer to themselves, and that's how the world referred to them. And the Jewish people were born in Palestine before May 14th, 1948. Their birth certificate said born in Palestine. So at this point where we are right now, all the Palestinian Jews become Israeli. We no longer use the term Palestinian Jews. Palestinian Jews become Israeli citizens on May 1948 and going forward from there. This is one very important fact. But that, my friends, is a very easy fact to understand. All of the Jewish people become citizens of the state of Israel automatically. But now we get to the complicated and to the most important piece. And this, unfortunately, is an information that most of the world does not understand. That's why I really keep building it up, that it's the most important piece of information. Because when the same thing happened to the Jewish population, they all became Israeli citizens, full stop. We cannot say the same for the Arab Palestinian population. And in fact, the Arab Palestinian population of 1,200,000 people was divided into three uneven groups. And they were divided to three uneven groups, not by their own choice. Some will call it by chance alone. Some will call it by misfortune or fortune. But the real reasons were geographical location. These three different realities, or three different outcomes, or three different results were circumstantial. And they were based on the fact who was sitting physically where when these three completely different realities happened to this large group that was known to be called Palestinian Arabs up until that stage. Group number one, approximately 150, maybe 200,000 people the most, woke up in the late summer of 1949 in places like Nazareth, like Beersheba, like the Galilee, like the Negev, like Jaffa, like Haifa, looked around themselves and understood that they are now living in a country called Israel. And the Israeli government also looked around in late summer of 1949 and understood that not only Jewish people live in its country. What to do? So after thinking about it, the Israeli government of late summer 1949 extended a hand in the proposal of citizenship to that relatively small group of Palestinian Arabs, somewhere between 150 and 200,000, that were living now within the borders of the state of Israel, telling them that you're going to be a minority in our country, but you're also going to enjoy equal rights, such as education, healthcare, welfare, and so on. We even not gonna make you serve in the army. You have the right to become Israeli citizens. If you want to become, welcome. If you don't want, goodbye. I'm, of course, simplifying the situation, but it wasn't much more complicated than that. That's the truth. And vast majority of those Palestinian Arabs that found themselves within the borders of the state of Israel said, yes. Where are we going to go? This is our home. This has been our home for centuries. So it used to be called British Mandate. Before that, it used to be called the Ottoman Empire. Now it's called Israel. Okay. This too shall pass in their mind, their thought, or many of them. But they said yes. And they become Israeli citizens. Sometimes the Israeli Jews refer to them as the 1948 Arabs. But we need to understand that we talk about Palestinian Arabs that in late summer 1949 became Israeli citizens. And all the generations that were born to them for the last 75 years, their children and their great children to this day are Israeli citizens. And the 150 to 200,000 people from 75 years ago, any ideas how many are we talking about today? If you know, just open up the mic and say. Any ideas? How many Arab citizens we have inside of Israel today?
2
2
million.
million.
That's right. Thank you. Almost 2 million people. It is the largest minority of the state of Israel, over 22%. Whether they're equal citizens or not, we will talk about. But they are citizens. There are a lot of issues of inequality. But at the same time, they get free public education, universal health care, all welfare bonuses, and at least on the surface, on the ground, definitely same privileges and same rights as the Jewish population. So this is only one group. Very, very important group, but this is only one group. Let's go back to the slide before with the map, Lisa, please, and we'll talk about the second group. Remember how we said that the West Bank and East Jerusalem is conquered by Jordan and how the Gaza Strip is conquered by Egypt? Well, guess what? These countries did not only conquer land. They did conquer the land, but with the people that were living on that land. And those people were Palestinian Arabs, of course. The fact that they were at that geography was the reason that those areas were supposed to be part of Palestine, according to the United Nations Partition Plan. So they didn't go anywhere during the war. They stayed. Only if they would have said yes to the partition plan, they would be living in an independent country by now. But unfortunately, they said no. And there was a war. And as a result of that war, the Palestinian Arabs of the West Bank and East Jerusalem now become part of Jordan. And the Palestinian Arabs of the Gaza Strip now become part of Egypt. These two countries are their sovereignty. They even give them sort of a citizenship. And this becomes their reality for the next 19 years. Why only 19? Because in June 1967, their reality will change as a result of another war, and that will be the Six-Day War. But between now and June 1967, the Palestinian Arabs of the West Bank are part of Jordan, and the Palestinian Arabs of the Gaza Strip are part of Egypt. And this is group number 2. And now, my friends, I go to group number 3. Group number 3 is the birth of what we call the Palestinian refugees. And what does that mean? Let's go back to the map for last time. Lisa, please. During the war, somewhere around 800,000, maybe even 900,000 of Palestinian Arabs left physically, took themselves and left this land. Their departure had different reasoning. Some left by their own initiative because there was a war. They were afraid. They took themselves and they left. Some left because the Israeli army came and pushed them. And others left because the Arab countries told them, leave. We will fight for you. And we will win. And when we win, you will be invited to come back, which of course did not happen. Some left from areas that are now green on my map, and they escaped towards either West Bank or Gaza. And in the summer of 1949, in the West Bank, under Jordanian rule, and in Gaza Strip, under Egyptian rule, United Nations opened up refugee camps for the Arab Palestinian people. Most of them left outside of the land. Let's go further, Lisa. And those who left outside of the land all over the world. One more. Thank you. Went all over the world. No, one backward. Some went that direction. Back. Yes, no, one more. That's it. Someone, no. Forward.
Sorry, you keep freezing, so it's hard. Hold on. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. One.
No, it's not. It's. You want this?
One more. No, one more. That's it. So some went to Lebanon, some went to Syria, some went to Jordan, and some went far, far away to America, to Europe, to Australia. And this little map shows you a little bit where are the Palestinians around the world today. All over the world. And this is back the Al Jazeera talks about 13 million Palestinians in the world. And it's really, really difficult to put the finger on how many exactly. Let's go one slide forward. The key becomes the symbol of the Palestinian refugees. A lot of these people who are now in the grandparents' generation that literally themselves left the land in 1948, live somewhere in the world, close or far, doesn't matter, and they still hold the key, literally, to the house that they left from. Some of these houses still exist and other people living in them, whether it's Jews or Arabs. And many of these houses are long gone, but they still hold the key. But most importantly, they hold to the identity. And we need to understand that the United Nations, that has an office to deal with world refugees around the world, and they have a special office, one of a kind, unique, to deal with Palestinian refugees. And Palestinians are the only nation in the world that can inherit the refugee status, even if they are born in a different place and are citizens of that place. For example, United States of America. If we have a college student today in the early 20s who is from a Palestinian descent, born in America, you know better than me that they are American citizens. If you have college students at home, ask them if they met a Palestinian student on campus. If they will say yes, ask them if they had a conversation with them. If they ever had a conversation and they touched the identity question, most of those Palestinian college students in America today, and it's true all over the world also, will identify themselves as Palestinian refugees. Wait a minute, but they're not refugees, they're American citizens. Yes, but it doesn't matter. They inherit the narrative, which is very, very strong because their grandparents still have the keys to the house that they left from. I'll give you another example. Several years ago, I was privileged to lead a journey following the big refugee crisis. I think it was 2017. And I traveled with a group of Americans from New York to Greece. And we met refugees from all over the world, mainly from the Middle East. It was a very, very, very painful trip. And one day we were in Lesbos. It's an island in Greece, which was a center of the route, of the immigration route from predominantly Syria, but not only. And they would go through these Aegean islands in Greece, and then from there we'll continue to other countries in Europe. We're visiting a shelter filled with women and children, and I see a teenage boy over there, and we start talking. I speak some Arabic, so I ask him in Arabic, where are you from? He didn't want to tell me at first, so he asks me, where are you from? So I tell him, Ana min al-Quds, I'm from Jerusalem. And he says, oh, you're from Palestine. There was a sparkle in his eyes. And I say, no, I'm actually from Israel. And he goes, what do you mean? You said you're from Jerusalem. You're from Palestine. So we go back and forth 5 times or something like that. I say, I'm from Israel. And he says, no, you're from Palestine. I'm from Israel. No, you're from Palestine. I understand that it's going to a dead end. So I ask him again, where are you from? Without blinking, he tells me, I'm in Haifa. I'm from Haifa. And I talk to myself as I talk to him, and I say, I know that he is a Syrian refugee. Why is he telling me that he's from Haifa? And you follow this logic? He is 16 years old. So I again ask him, where are you from? He says, from Haifa. I know without a doubt in my mind that he is not from Haifa. So then I ask him, where are you born? He says, I born in Damascus. So where are you from? I ask again. I'm from Haifa. This is the logic. True story. I have thousands of those. Who was from Haifa? His grandparents, who still hold the key. And in 1948-9, they escaped from Haifa to Syria, to Damascus. And now they're refugees again because of the civil war in Syria. But in their identity, and not only theirs, but also his, at the age of 16, they are Palestinian refugees. And until there's going to be a Palestinian state, they will continue to tell themselves and the world, and the United Nations will continue to support that. The only nation in the world that can inherit the refugee status are the Palestinian people. Let's take it one slide forward. We're almost getting to the end. 2 terms that are important to understand. One is the law of return. The law of return is one of the first laws that were established in Israel as early as 1950, which basically says that a Jewish person down to third generation, meaning one of four grandparents, if one of four grandparents is Jewish, that person is entitled to come home to our historic homeland, the state of Israel, and become a citizen the minute you get off the airplane. As you know, and here I was not born in Israel. I came to Israel when I was 8 years old, and I became a citizen the minute I get off the airplane. My husband Daniel came from America in 2010, and he became a citizen in the airport the minute he got off the plane. Jewish people don't apply for citizenship in Israel. It is given to us as our birth given right, and that is under the law of return. And this is how Jewish people came from all over the world and continue to come, even nowadays, under the law of return. Not to be confused with the law of return, but something that is very, very important and we hear about a lot is the right of return. The right of return is a principle of a national law coming from the International Declarations of Human Rights that was actually sealed and signed in the United Nations on December 10th, 1948, saying that every single person has the international legal right to return to the country of their origin or citizenship. And there are many nations and many people that are using or fighting for their right to return to the country of their origin. One of those people in our scenario are the Palestinian people. So in any negotiation, and we're going to talk about those in the next sessions, when once upon a time there were negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian people, one of the most important criteria was the right of return. What does that mean? The Palestinians want to have the right of return. That all the Palestinians that want to from around the world will get the right to come back. By the way, to come back where? To the place they left from. The key, the many multiple thousands, hundred thousands of keys that the Palestinian families are holding for the last 75 years, the right of return, and or the fight for the right of return, and for them to be able to come back and open the house is the key that they left from, most of which doesn't exist anymore, and most of which are in areas that are now Israel. We're not only talking about the West Bank and Gaza, we're talking about from the river to the sea. So these are two very, very important distinctions to make. Lisa, let's go forward. First of all, another important criteria, and then we're going to end. Something that is used very often as an argument, as a historical argument to the phenomena of the Palestinian refugees is the concept of Jewish refugees from the Arab world. When the state of Israel was established, there were a lot of riots and pogroms in Jewish communities in Arab countries of the Middle East. Now, just keep in mind that Jewish communities in these countries existed for almost 500 years. And in most places, we talk about very, very successful and very, very wealthy communities. When the state of Israel was born, there were serious riots, and most of these Jewish communities needed to flee and to leave everything behind. They were not able to take anything with them. And same as the Palestinian Arabs left their homes in Israel-Palestine and left without having the ability to come back. Same, by the way, in very similar numbers, happened to Jewish communities in Arab countries that needed to flee away and were never given a possibility to come back. You can see the numbers of in red what it used to be and how many Jews, if any, are in every single one of these countries today, whether it's Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and beyond. So very often this is sort of used as a bargain card to eliminate the concept of Palestinian refugees. Personally, I don't like playing these cards, and I don't think that one people's pain needs to be compared with another. Both realities happened, and we need to know that they happened. The Jewish people were able to come to the land of Israel and become Israeli citizens. The Palestinians fled around the world, became asylum seekers, refugees, and so on and so forth. There are similar components, and of course, there's an ocean of differences between the two stories, but it's important for us to hold these two in our hands. And as we're wrapping up, it's another map. You can look at it at home if you want afterwards. I'll share it with you. On our very, very first session, I shared with you this poem by Yehuda Amichai that I always go back to talking about this because we are learning. And by now, I hope already, if not before, we're able to form some opinions about this very, very, very complicated situation. And I want us to sort of are to prove the
Hey, Rabbi Lana, you're cutting out. I don't know if you. Oh, well, Rabbi Lana left, unfortunately. She got kicked off, I guess. But what she was saying was we did this poem in the first session, and I think this is a place where we can do this again, as we're talking about 1947, 1948, what happened with these three important components of the wars. So I'll read it for us. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard, but doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. So as Rabbi Lana was saying, these are two narratives that go parallel. Oh, I think she's back. Maybe.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Perfect. No, you're good. We just read the poem. You're good. So you can continue if you'd like.
Beautiful. So let's just finish, jump to the next one. I highly recommend to read the poems of Yehuda Amichai is definitely my favorite. But next to him, if you want to have a sentiment of the parallel narrative, is Mahmoud Darwish. Lisa, can you take us forward? He is a Palestinian poet who wrote multiple poems about his exile and his yearning for a homeland. And if you'll find this journal that he's calling Journal of an Ordinary Grief. So this is something that is taken from there. But there are many, 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 many more. Let's go to the next one. We started with the intention of holding in our hearts the Bibas family, that I truly hope that we'll find out that the Hamas rumors are wrong and that they're still with us. And whether it will happen or not, the fact is that for the last 8 weeks of this horrific war that is happening right now, and I hope that by now you can already understand that it's happening for the exact same reasons as any other war between the two parties happened over the course of the last many decades. This is one family, one of hundreds of families that we have lost on October 7th, the family of Tamar Kedmi from Kibbutz Kfar Aza, an entire family that was taken by Hamas terrorists on that Shabbat morning. And I want to be able for myself, I ask for myself, and maybe some of you can relate to that, and maybe some of you not, and that is absolutely okay. I want to find in my heart the ability to feel the pain for this family, which is part of my extended family. And at the same place and at the same heart, to have space to contain the pain of, Lisa, take us forward, please, of the Palestinian family, whether it's this one or a different one, because human lives is human lives. And Palestinian others are like birth, want to see our children thrive, and definitely don't want to be in a situation like what we are experiencing at these times. So I want to be able to find in my heart, have space for our own pain and for the pain of the parallel narratives. It's one of the reasons I'm spending this week in Lisbon with religious leaders from the entire world, and particularly from the Middle East. And we'll end with a brief quote of Mahmoud Darwish on the next slide. Out of my ignorance, I called you a homeland, and I forgot homelands are taken away. So I hope that each of the people in this story will be able to continue and relate to the land as their homeland, and that eventually we will get to a place that nobody will want to take the homeland from the other party, and there will be a way somehow, and I don't know how, maybe together we'll figure it out, to share the land as it was initially intended. But until then, of course, we'll meet next week and we will learn some more. And this was a very, very long session, and I'm sorry it was a lecture and not a conversation. I'm happy to stay more if some of you want to stay more and ask questions. You can also email me or just come visit me next week. And next Wednesday, we will meet both in person and on Zoom. So thank you for the long breath that you took to listening to me for such a long time. I don't tend to do it this way usually. And if you want to stay in chat, I'm happy to. Lisa, we can shut down.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Yeah.